When I was younger, I used to stop by the library quite a bit after school. This happened during my first year of high school. At that time, I didn't have internet at home, so the library became kind of my go-to place. There was one just a little off the usual walk home, only a couple blocks out of the way. I'd head there to finish schoolwork, browse online, and sometimes just mess around on social media. On most days, I'd stay for a few hours, then make my way home. I usually went about 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes a little more. One afternoon after school, I went like usual and logged into one of the computers. The building itself was pretty big, 2 floors actually, and although there were always other people around, it never felt too crowded since everyone stayed spread out. After logging in, I got on Facebook and saw I had a new friend request. It was from someone I didn't recognize. The profile picture was just a photo of a car, and the name wasn't familiar. But back then, I pretty much accepted every request without thinking. So, I clicked accept and moved on. Right after I did, the person messaged me saying, "Hi." I replied the same. I started wondering who it could be. Then he said he was at the library too, right then and there. That definitely felt weird because I didn't know anyone there, and I'd never seen someone I knew from school hanging out in that place. He told me he was upstairs on the other side of the building. I didn't know what to make of that. I can't remember exactly what I said, but he kept sending messages and then started asking more personal stuff. That's when I stopped replying. It was starting to feel uncomfortable. I opened a new browser tab and tried to ignore it, but the messages kept coming in. After a few more popped up, I decided to just log out, close everything, and leave. I didn't look around the place, and I didn't know who it might have been. I just walked straight home, hoping I wouldn't hear from him again. A few days later, I went back to the library like normal, found a free computer, logged on, and saw even more messages from that same person waiting for me. I didn't answer anything, just ignored them again. He must have noticed I was online, since Facebook shows when people are active. More messages started coming in, but I didn't read them. I just kept doing my own thing. Not long after that, I suddenly felt a light tap on my shoulder. I turned around and saw a man I didn't recognize at all. He looked a lot older, had a patchy beard with gray and brown in it, and was wearing a green cap. He asked why I wasn't replying to his messages. I was caught off guard and didn't really say anything. Then he told me he was about to leave and asked if I'd come with him. He made a small gesture like I was supposed to follow him. I told him no. He stood there for a bit, not saying anything else, then finally walked away. But he didn't leave the building. Instead, he went and sat near the main entrance, right by the doors. From where I was sitting, I could clearly see him. He was facing my direction, like he was just waiting. I really didn't want to walk past him to leave, because I had this feeling that he might try to follow me or say something again. So I stayed at the computer, trying to act normal, but every time I glanced over, he was still sitting there, looking my way. Luckily, I had just gotten a phone not long before that, so I called my mom. I explained everything and asked if she could come get me. She had just gotten off work, so it took her around 20 minutes to get there. When she arrived, she came into the building, and we walked out together. As we got closer to the doors, the man stood up and walked off in the opposite direction. Later on, my mom contacted the library and told them what happened. They took it seriously and were able to figure out who he was pretty quickly. The police even got involved. That guy was permanently banned from coming back. After that, I felt okay going there again. I never saw him after that day. And honestly, I hope I never do. This happened when I was still in school. It was during summer break, and my parents were heading out for the weekend with a few of their friends. That meant I'd be staying at home by myself. I didn't have anything major planned, just figured I'd play some games and relax. Our house was decent, not too big, not too small. It was in a quiet neighborhood, and most people kept to themselves. Once my parents left, I kind of liked the feeling of having the whole place to myself. It wasn't something that happened very often. Everything felt fine until the second night. It was Friday, and I ended up staying awake pretty late. I'd been playing games on my console and finally shut everything down around 2 a.m. After that, I turned off the lights and got into bed. Just as I started feeling relaxed and close to falling asleep, I heard something. It was this tapping sound coming from the window in my bedroom. It wasn't loud, but I knew I wasn't imagining it. I sat up and looked around the room. Everything was quiet now, and when I looked at the window, I didn't notice anything unusual. I figured I was just overthinking it, or maybe I misheard something. Still, I stayed up for a few more minutes just listening. Nothing happened, so I eventually told myself it was nothing and tried to go back to sleep. Within a few minutes, I was settled again. But then I heard it again. This time it was louder, and there was no way I was wrong. I sat up quickly and looked toward the window. That's when I noticed something moved just out of view. I only caught it for a second, but it didn't seem like a branch or anything normal. My window was near a tree, so I kept telling myself it was probably just the wind. But deep down, I knew something felt off. I turned on my bedroom light and decided to go to the living room instead. I just felt more comfortable out there. I looked outside through the window in the living room, and at first, everything looked normal. But then I noticed a car on the street. I'd never seen it before, and it was parked right near our house. It didn't seem like it belonged to any of the neighbors. I kept watching it, wondering if someone was inside, but that's when I heard another noise. This time, it came from the back of the house. It wasn't knocking this time. It sounded like someone was messing with the back door, like they were trying to open it. As soon as I heard that, I rushed back to my room and got under the blankets. I grabbed my phone and called the police. I explained everything that had happened and didn't move from where I was. I tried to keep myself calm and just waited. I didn't hear anything else after that. A little while later, the police finally arrived. I got up and met them at the front door. What they told me really got to me. They said that as they were coming around to the back of the house, they saw someone running off into the woods behind the yard. When they checked the back door, it was actually open. That meant whoever was there managed to get inside. I didn't even know he'd been that close. His car was still out on the street though, so they had something to go on. They were able to find him not long after, and knowing that helped me feel a lot better. When I was about 19, some of my close friends and I decided to take a day trip to a small city not too far from where we lived in Oregon. After spending the entire day exploring and walking around, we got back in the car at around 9 p.m. and started heading home. The road we were on was a highway without any streetlights, surrounded by trees on both sides. As we were driving, a white car came up behind us at a high speed. Since they were clearly going faster than us, my friend who was behind the wheel moved into the right lane to let them pass. They sped past us, but once in front, they slowed down and started matching the speed limit. We didn't think much of it at the time, and we went back to chatting and enjoying the ride. After a little while, I realized we weren't going as fast as we should be. I glanced at the dashboard and saw we were only going about 45 miles per hour, which was a bit slower than usual. I looked at the car in front and said something like, "Why'd they slow down so much after passing us?" Everyone just kind of shrugged it off as weird, and we kept talking for another few minutes. Then the car ahead of us slowed down even more, first to 40, then 35 miles per hour. My friend driving started getting annoyed. All of us turned our attention to the car in front. It dropped to 20, then 15, and eventually stopped completely in the middle of the road. At that point, we were all confused and uneasy. We talked about whether they needed help, but it didn't make sense, because they could have pulled off to the side if something was really wrong. Soon we noticed another vehicle approaching from behind. As it got closer, the car in front suddenly sped up again and went back to the speed limit. That's when we started to feel nervous. It was too odd to ignore. Once that other car passed, we tried to stay behind it, but the white car made it hard by keeping pace with us. No matter if we sped up or slowed down, it got really uncomfortable because the white car was matching every move we made. Our driver didn't feel safe enough to try and pass, worried they might do something if we got too close. Eventually, the white car moved farther ahead, and we were on the road by ourselves again. But soon after, it stopped in the road one more time. One of my friends suggested we try to pass it quickly, but I said we should hold off. I didn't like the idea of getting beside them. It just didn't feel safe. We still didn't have any phone signal, so there wasn't much we could do. It felt like we were in a situation we didn't know how to handle. We agreed to turn around. Even though the other car was still in front of us, we made a quick U-turn and drove in the opposite direction. After putting some distance between us and the other car, we pulled off into one of those gravel rest areas where big trucks sometimes stop for the night. We turned our lights off and waited for another vehicle to come by. After maybe 20 minutes, we saw a semi-truck approaching. We pulled out in front of it, making sure there was plenty of space between us. As we got closer to the same spot where we had turned around, we saw the white car again, still moving slowly. But as soon as they noticed us in the semi, they sped off down the road and disappeared. We didn't see that car again for the rest of the drive. We stayed close to the truck just to be safe. Even now, I sometimes think back and wonder what would have happened if we had kept following them or tried to pass. Maybe it was just a strange joke, or maybe it was something more serious. I guess we'll never really know. I used to work the night shift at a small convenience store just outside of a quiet town. I didn't stay there long, maybe a month at most, but something happened during that short time that I'll never forget. Most of my shifts were uneventful, especially during the later hours. One particular night, I was working alone. It wasn't very late, probably around 10 p.m. Up until that point, the store had a steady flow of customers, people stopping in for snacks or fuel. But right around 10, things started to slow down. It got really quiet. I stood behind the counter for a while after the last person walked out. Over the next hour, maybe 2 or 3 people came in, and a couple of others just used the pumps and left. Eventually, the place went completely still. I started getting bored, so like usual, I took out my phone and scrolled through it to pass the time. Nothing in the store needed attention. After about 10 minutes, I suddenly heard a sound coming from the back of the store. That section was out of sight from where I stood. The whole place wasn't that big, maybe 5 aisles in total, but there were blind spots. It caught me off guard because I was completely sure nobody else had walked in. I stood up, already feeling uneasy. Just as I started walking, I heard another sound, louder this time. I called out to see if someone was there, but no one answered. I moved slowly toward the area, kind of wishing I didn't have to. I turned into the aisle where I thought the noise came from, but nothing was there. I paused for a moment, still scanning, when I heard something again, this time coming from the next aisle over. I stepped around the end of the shelf and saw a man appear from around the corner. I had no clue where he came from or how he got in without me noticing. He looked scruffy, long hair, a thick beard. He walked straight toward me and held out his hand like he wanted to show me something. I couldn't tell what it was, and before I could say anything, I felt a jolt hit me, and I dropped to the floor. The guy had a stun device or something and used it on me. I couldn't move for a few seconds. As I lay there, I saw him reach up and start grabbing random stuff off the shelves. Then he shouted something. I didn't catch most of it, just a few curse words, and rushed out of the store. I stayed down for probably a minute before I managed to sit up and call the police. Officers showed up after a while, but the guy was already gone. We checked the security cameras, and what we found was even stranger. That man had actually been hiding behind one of the aisles for over an hour before making a move. I had no idea what he was planning or why he waited so long. All I knew was after that night, I gave my notice and never went back. I live alone in an apartment on the second floor of a fairly average-looking building. There are 4 floors total, and each one has a long, straight hallway. The place is only about 10 minutes from the city, in an area with a decent number of people around. I've been here for about 2 years now, and honestly, I really like living here. But a few months ago, something happened that still makes me uncomfortable to think about. It was a regular night, and I was home by myself. My apartment has 1 bedroom, a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. I was on the couch in the living room watching TV. I don't remember the exact time, but it was sometime after 10 p.m. I had gotten home from work around an hour earlier. While watching TV, I started hearing a few noises. At first, I assumed it was just my neighbor next door. That kind of thing wasn't unusual, so I didn't think twice. Maybe half an hour passed. Then, out of nowhere, I started feeling strange, like something wasn't right. It wasn't anything I could explain, but I noticed myself looking around more than usual. When I glanced over my shoulder toward my bedroom, only about 5 feet away, I saw a man peeking his head around the doorway. He was staring directly at me. Our eyes met for just a second before he quickly pulled his head back out of sight. I jumped up from the couch and ran straight out of my apartment. I was completely caught off guard. I had no idea who this guy was, or how he even got in. Once I was in the hallway, I realized I didn't have my phone. I'd left it on the couch. I also couldn't leave in my car because my keys were on the kitchen counter. I stood there not sure what to do. There was one person I knew in the building, a woman named Rachel who lived further down the hallway. We talked sometimes. I knocked on her door, hoping she was awake, but she didn't answer. It was late, so she was probably already asleep. That's when I thought I should just go back to my apartment and grab my phone and keys. I told myself maybe the man had already left, or maybe I imagined the whole thing. It all happened so fast that I was even starting to doubt if it was real. I couldn't figure out how anyone could have gotten inside. I always locked my front door, and I was pretty sure I did that night too. Still, I made my way back to my door and stood there for a minute trying to get the courage to go in. My plan was simple. Run inside, grab my phone from the couch, grab my keys from the counter, and run back out. 10 seconds, tops. I slowly opened the door, then froze. The man was standing right there in the middle of my living room facing me. I slammed the door shut and ran as fast as I could down the hallway toward the stairwell and all the way to the first floor. I rushed out the front entrance and kept going until I was outside. I still couldn't leave because I didn't have my car keys, so I started walking down the sidewalk. I walked for a while until I came across a gas station that was still open. I went inside and asked the guy at the counter if he could call the police. I waited there until they arrived. When the officers showed up, we went back to my apartment together. But when we got there, the man was already gone. They searched my apartment and looked around the building, but they didn't find him. He had taken my laptop, my wallet, and a few other things. My phone was still there, but only because it had slipped between the cushions on the couch. He probably didn't even see it. I don't know if they ever caught him. The best guess anyone had was that he got in through my balcony. I had a small balcony, and even though it would have been tough to climb up from the ground, it wasn't impossible. The sliding door to it had been shut, but I never bothered to lock it. He must have gotten in that way while I was at work earlier. Since that night, everything's been fine. I haven't had any other problems. I replaced the stuff he stole, and I now keep everything locked at all times, even the balcony door. But what I still think about is why he came to my place in the first place. Was he watching me? Did he know I lived alone? I guess I'll never really know. But that 1 second of seeing him looking at me will always stay with me. I live with a roommate, and something strange happened not too long ago. We rent a small place not far from downtown. The price is decent, and things have been going pretty smoothly, at least up until this one incident. My roommate's name is Brian. We get along fine, though I wouldn't call us super close. We both work different shifts, so it's normal for us not to see each other for a few days at a time. A couple of months back, I came home from work one evening. It was around 6 p.m. I went straight to the kitchen to grab a drink, and on my way out into the living room, I noticed that the back door was wide open. Not just unlocked, completely open. I walked over and shut it, thinking Brian must have forgotten to close it. Between the two of us, we can both be careless sometimes, but this seemed like something he would do more than me. I closed the door, locked it, and shook my head a little. Then I went upstairs to my room. I was probably up there for about half an hour when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I just assumed it was Brian. I didn't even consider it could be someone else. The person reached the top of the stairs and walked down the hallway. When they passed by my bedroom door, which was shut, I called out, "Brian." No reply. I followed up with, "You left the back door open." Still nothing. That caught me off guard because I knew he heard me. I figured maybe he was in the bathroom, the guest room, or his bedroom. So I opened my door to see what was up. But when I stepped into the hallway, I didn't see Brian. Instead, there was some guy I had never seen before. He was tall and thin, with longer blonde hair and a light reddish beard. As soon as he looked over at me, I turned and took off running. He came after me right away. I didn't think I could get the front or back door open in time. I would have had to unlock it, pull it open, too risky. So, in a quick decision, I ran toward the basement. I know that sounds dumb, but in that moment, it felt like the only option. The basement door was already slightly open, and it was right next to the stairs. The guy was maybe 20 feet behind me at that point. I ran down into the basement without flipping the light on. It was completely dark. The place isn't finished. We just have our washer and dryer down there and some boxes and containers. Nothing else, really. I turned left as soon as I got to the bottom, then moved behind the stairs. That spot felt like my best chance to stay hidden. It was pitch black down there. I could hear the guy coming down the stairs a few seconds later. He didn't say anything. I had no idea what he wanted or what he planned to do. He started moving around the room, slowly, knocking over one of the boxes. He was clearly looking for me, though I couldn't figure out why. At one point, it sounded like he walked further into the basement, away from where I was hiding. I thought about making a run for it, but I stayed where I was. I just couldn't bring myself to move. The space I was in wasn't an obvious spot to look unless you were familiar with the basement layout. He circled the area a bit more, even walked close to where I was, but somehow he didn't check my spot. He stayed down there for what felt like 10 or 15 minutes. Finally, I heard him go back up the stairs. I wasn't sure what to do. I felt like I had some breathing room now, but I also didn't want to walk into a trap if he was still nearby. Luckily, I had my phone on me. This was actually the first time I thought to call for help. I called 911 and tried to keep my voice as quiet as possible. It was dead silent in that basement, and I didn't want him to hear me. I explained that someone had broken into my house and chased me down into the basement. They told me officers were on the way. I ended the call and stayed completely still. About 10 minutes later, I was starting to feel a little better. But then I heard the basement door open again. The guy walked back down, slowly this time. He only stayed for maybe a minute before turning around and heading back upstairs. I had no clue what he was doing. Then, I heard a knock at the front door. It had to be the police. I heard the guy suddenly run through the house. I came out from behind the stairs and ran back up to let them in. And yeah, it was definitely the police. I yelled out that the guy was leaving through the back door. They chased him down a few blocks away. Turns out Brian had accidentally left the back door unlocked before he left for work. That's how the guy got in. I still don't know what he wanted or why he chased me. All I know is, I don't ever want to see that guy again, and I'm hoping Brian double-checks that door from now on. This happened to me in the early fall of 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic. My buddy Mike and I were driving from Philadelphia to Indiana. We were heading out there to take on a few flooring jobs, and also check out some houses we were thinking about fixing up and selling. We used his company truck for the trip. We figured we'd leave in the evening and drive through the night to get there by morning. Part of our route took us along a 2-lane highway that runs through the hills of West Virginia. It's not exactly the safest road. Lots of winding turns and steep drop-offs. I was the one driving while Mike tried to get some rest in the passenger seat. Around midnight, I pulled into a gas station to top off the tank and grabbed a couple of drinks and snacks. There was just one other vehicle there at the time, a red SUV parked a few pumps away. I didn't think anything of it and got back in the truck pretty quickly. About half an hour later, I was cruising in the left lane going around 90 miles per hour when I noticed headlights behind us. I could tell it was the same red SUV from the gas station. At first I didn't think much of it, but then it hit me. This car had been behind us ever since we left the station. To see if it was really following us, I dropped my speed to 70 and waited. Sure enough, the SUV also slowed down and stayed right behind us. That's when I started getting concerned. I woke Mike up and filled him in. Mike used to be in the army, so he's way more alert in situations like this. Right away, he said he remembered the SUV and that the driver was staring at me hard when we were at the gas station. Mike told me to try switching lanes to see what would happen. I did, and sure enough, the SUV followed immediately. Mike then told me to pull onto the shoulder and stop completely. I did, and again, the SUV slowed down and pulled up behind us. Mike was convinced the guy probably had a weapon with him, judging by how confident he was to stop right behind us in the middle of nowhere. We looked around the truck to see what we had. There was a small hatchet, a machete in the back, and we both had pocket knives, but no guns or anything like that. Mike told me to hit the gas and speed back up to 90. I pulled back onto the road and stayed in the right lane, trying to put some distance between us, but the SUV kept following. Mike then had a wild idea. He wanted me to brake hard so the guy would rear-end us. Then he'd jump out and go at the SUV with the tools we had. That sounded way too extreme to me, and I said no. At that point, the guy hadn't done anything outright dangerous, and getting into a crash on purpose didn't seem smart. I asked Mike if he had another idea. He reached into the back and grabbed a big handheld spotlight he keeps for job sites. He opened the rear window and tried to aim it at the SUV. He switched it on, but the guy's front windows were really dark, so we couldn't see inside. I came up with a quick plan and swerved into the left lane. As I did, Mike shined the light again, hoping to catch a glimpse of the driver through the side window. For just a few seconds, we got a clear look. The guy was huge. Had to be over 6.5 feet, hunched way over the wheel. His hair was a mess, and his face looked completely off. I don't know if it was just the shadows or what, but something about him felt really wrong. The moment he saw that we were both wide awake and watching him, he took the next exit, which led to a rest stop. Even now, Mike and I still argue about what we should have done. He thinks I should have slammed the brakes and confronted the guy. He's convinced the guy was out looking to hurt someone. I still think doing that could have ended badly in 100 different ways. But I do agree. Whatever that guy was up to, it wasn't anything good. At the very least, he was probably planning to rob us. At worst, something way more serious. I'm just thankful we never had to find out, and I hope nobody else runs into that guy by themselves. It was a chilly night in early autumn, sometime around 1 a.m., and I was out driving on a quiet country road in northern Minnesota. It's a small road that not many people use, except for farm equipment and the occasional delivery truck. It's not far from where I live, and I often take late drives just to listen to music and clear my head. I was cruising down a long, straight part of the road that runs through a stretch of low woods and marsh. There are steep ditches on both sides, and once it gets dark, you really have to stay alert for deer. I'd taken that road plenty of times before, and this drive didn't feel any different, until I came across a patch of ground fog. It wasn't very thick, just enough to make the headlights scatter a little and make it harder to see clearly for a few seconds. As I went through it, I kept watching the ditch on my side of the road to make sure no deer were going to jump out. Just as the fog began to clear, I noticed something that made me uneasy. There was a figure coming up out of the ditch. At first I thought it might be a person, but it didn't look right. It was moving in a strange way, kind of pulling itself along without using legs. It was like it was dragging its body up the side of the ditch. The way it moved wasn't how a person normally would. It looked rough and uneven. It all happened really fast, and by the time I passed that spot, it was gone. I couldn't figure out what I had just seen. I wasn't sleepy or anything like that. I was completely aware, just like I always am on those drives. I kept telling myself it had to be the fog playing tricks on my eyes or something like that. Still, it stuck with me. For several days, I kept going out of my way to avoid that road, even though it was the fastest way home. I just didn't want to be on it again, not after that night. A couple of weeks later, I was working out in the fields with my supervisor. We had to drive down that same road to get to the area we were working on. I didn't want to, but I didn't have another option. While we were on the way, I decided to tell him what I'd seen. I thought maybe he would know something that made sense of it, since he drove down that road all the time too. So I explained to him about the figure I saw crawling up out of the ditch, moving in that strange way. He stopped for a moment and gave me this look, like he was trying to tell if I was joking or not. Then he said something I didn't expect. He told me there used to be a farmer in that area who passed away on that road years ago. He said the man was driving a tractor late one evening when it tipped over into the same ditch. The farmer got pinned underneath and didn't survive. I didn't know anything about that before, but it kind of lined up with what I'd seen. I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't really want to hear the rest, and I didn't want to keep thinking about it. But deep down, I feel like I really did see something that night. Maybe even the farmer trying to come back up out of that ditch. This happened not too long ago. I was on my way to meet up with someone in the city. I lived maybe 10 minutes from downtown, which is where we had planned to meet. So I left my place and started driving. The road outside my apartment was part of a quiet neighborhood, and I remember noticing a car behind me not too far into the drive. It stood out because it was red, so it caught my attention, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I kept going, headed toward the downtown area. I wasn't paying attention to what was behind me for most of the way. But once I got off the highway and took the exit into the city, I realized that same red car was still behind me. I thought it was a little odd, but figured it could just be a random thing. After getting into the downtown streets, I accidentally made a wrong turn. Driving around that area can be confusing even with directions, and I still messed up from time to time, so I had to look back. That's when I noticed the red car made the exact same wrong turn I did, and it didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It started to seem like the car was actually following me. I didn't know what to do yet, and I was also just trying to focus on driving in the city, which isn't always easy. I had to drive to the end of the road and make a turn, and sure enough, the red car did the exact same thing again. I didn't feel safe parking anywhere just yet. Not if someone was following me. Then what seemed like good luck happened. The next road I turned onto was really busy. There were a bunch of cars and it was almost stop-and-go traffic. I used that chance to try and put some distance between us. I switched lanes a couple of times, maybe a little quickly, but it worked. Eventually, I got a few cars between us, and it looked like I was in the clear. I had to make another turn shortly after, and I didn't see the red car behind me anymore. A few minutes later, I arrived where I had planned to park. There were some open spaces along the street, and I picked one and parked my car. As I started to get out, I noticed the red car again. It had parked just a few spaces behind mine. That made me really uneasy. I decided to walk to the place where I was supposed to meet my friend. It was only a couple of blocks away. I locked my car and started walking quickly down the sidewalk. Before turning the corner, I glanced behind me. That's when I saw a man get out of the red car and begin walking the same way I was heading. He was wearing a black jacket and sunglasses, even though the sun had started to go down. I didn't stop. I just kept walking toward where I was going. Every so often I looked behind me, and he was still following but keeping his distance. Eventually, I got to the place where I was meeting my friend. She was already there. I told her what was happening and pointed the guy out. We were in a public area with plenty of other people nearby. She thought we should just go up to the man since there were enough people around. We started walking in his direction. He had been standing near the corner, acting like he wasn't paying attention to anything. As soon as we got close, maybe within 30 feet, he turned and began walking away from us. At that point, I figured it was over. He was probably gone for good, and we didn't think about it much after that. A few hours later, I left to go back to my car. It was nighttime by then. I walked up to where I had parked, but before getting inside, I noticed the red car again. It was still parked in the same spot. That really got to me. Instead of getting in, I turned and began walking the other direction. I heard a car door open and saw the same guy getting out again. I couldn't believe he'd stayed there the whole time. He started walking after me once more. I stayed in the sidewalk and moved as quickly as I could. The area we were in had gotten quiet by then. Not many people around. He kept some distance but didn't stop. After a few blocks, I turned a corner and came onto a street that had more activity. That's when I saw a police car parked nearby. There was an officer sitting inside. I walked straight over to the vehicle. When I got there, I said hello and explained what had been happening. I looked back and saw the man walking around the corner again, like he was trying not to be seen. The officer walked with me back to my car. Once we got close, the red car suddenly drove off. I got in my car and went home right after that. Nothing else happened. I never saw that man or that red car again. I don't know why he followed me or what he wanted. It was just one of those strange situations that really stuck with me. Some time back, I used to deliver pizzas during my summer job. After finishing college, I became a teacher, but in the early years, the pay wasn't great. So during summer breaks when school was out, I picked up part-time work delivering pizza. I worked at a local place called Eddie's Pizza, and they stayed open pretty late. Most of my shifts ran into the early hours of the morning. One of those late-night deliveries turned into something I still think about today. The order itself seemed normal. I packed the pizza into my car and drove to the listed address. When I turned onto the street, the first thing I noticed was that there were no working street lights at all. There were about 4 or 5 houses along one side of the road. The other side was just dense trees, barely 10 feet from the pavement. I parked in front of the last house and walked up to the front door holding the pizza. There wasn't a doorbell, so I knocked a few times, loud enough to be heard. I waited about a minute, maybe a little more, but no one answered. I couldn't just leave the food there because we hadn't been paid yet. I knocked again, even louder this time. Eventually, I saw a faint light flicker on inside, and then the door opened. An older man stood there, clearly just woken up. He looked irritated and told me he never ordered anything. I apologized, thinking I must have gone to the wrong place. Still standing there, I took out my phone and double-checked the delivery address. It matched, so whoever placed the order probably typed in the wrong number, which happened every now and then. There was no contact number listed for the customer either, so I didn't have many options. I turned back toward my car with the pizza, opened the passenger side door, and placed the box on the seat. Just as I shut the door and started to walk around to the driver's side, I felt something cold press against the back of my head. A man told me to give him everything I had on me. His voice was low and steady. I didn't argue. I reached into the front seat and handed him the pouch we used for cash deliveries. Luckily, we emptied it often, so it didn't have more than maybe $100 in it. The whole time, he made sure I didn't turn around. I just held the money out behind me, and he snatched it from my hand. He warned me not to follow him. Then he shoved me hard against the car. As I turned around, I saw him disappear into the woods, just a dark figure moving fast between the trees. I got back into the car and drove straight to the store. I couldn't stop thinking about what just happened. I had never been in a situation like that before. It was strange, almost like it was all set up ahead of time. That house being close to the woods, no lights, no real way to verify the order. All that effort for a delivery guy who might not even have much money on him. I kept delivering pizzas for a while after that, but I made some changes. I started carrying pepper spray and paid a lot more attention to where I was going and who was around. Nothing like that ever happened to me again, but that one night was more than enough. For some background, I live alone in a small 2-bedroom house in a fairly quiet area. One night, I was at home by myself. It was getting late, and I was about to call it a night. I was already feeling a bit sleepy when there was a knock at my front door. My first thought was wondering who would be stopping by this late. But even more than that, it was strange because no one ever came knocking on my door. Especially not at that time. Because of that, I was immediately uneasy. I walked through the hallway to the front of the house. All of my windows were covered, including the one on the door. When I reached the front door, I moved the curtain slightly to check, but I didn't see anyone. I hesitated for a moment, then carefully opened the door and looked around. There wasn't a single person in sight. I stepped out onto the porch and checked both directions along the street, but whoever had knocked wasn't there anymore. Just as I was about to go back inside, I noticed something on the front step, an envelope. I picked it up and brought it inside. It had nothing written on the outside, no name or address, just plain white. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. When I opened it, I saw some writing, messy and difficult to read. It mentioned my name right at the top. The message didn't make much sense. Whoever wrote it seemed to be saying they knew who I was and where I lived. There were no direct threats, but the tone felt off, unsettling. The whole thing was written in a rushed, careless way. I couldn't even read some of the words because of how messy it was. I had no idea who would send something like that. After a few minutes of looking at it and getting nowhere, I threw it in the trash. I checked all the windows again, but saw nothing unusual outside. It looked like a normal night. I tried to shake it off and went to my room. I turned on the TV to help clear my head. A few minutes passed and I was finally starting to relax. Then I heard knocking again. But this time, it was from the back of the house. I grabbed my phone and called the police right away. I explained everything that had just happened. The knock, the note, and now this second knock. They told me someone would be sent over as soon as possible. While I waited, I went over to a window that looked out into my backyard. I didn't see anyone there either. A few minutes later, the police arrived. They looked around my property, asked me a few questions, and I gave them the letter to check out. But I never saw the person, so I had no way of describing anyone. After they finished searching the area and didn't find anything, they told me to call again if anything else happened. That was about all they could do. Eventually, I managed to fall asleep, though it took a while. Since that night, nothing else like that has happened. No more knocking, no more notes. But to this day, I still think about it sometimes. wondering who left that envelope and what their reason was. It could have just been some kind of joke or someone trying to scare me, but I honestly don't know anyone who would go that far, and I really hope I never find out who it was. I remember coming back home last year after being out of town for a work trip. I'd been away for a few days and was finally back at my apartment in the city. It was already nighttime when I got in, and I started unpacking right away. My place is a small one-bedroom apartment with a living room, a kitchen, and 1.5 bathrooms. Each space is just enough for me. I took a few things out of my bag and then went into my bedroom to keep going. Before I left for the trip, I'd been in a rush, so the place wasn't exactly spotless. One of the comforters I'd planned to wash was lying in the corner of the room. The other was on the bed, already in use. I hadn't gotten around to doing laundry before I left. While I was in the room, I was sorting out my clothes. Some went into the hamper, some into the drawers. At some point, I noticed something odd. The comforter in the corner. I could have sworn it moved. I didn't catch it directly, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw some sort of shift. I froze and stared at it, completely still. It didn't move again, but I stood there watching it for about a minute just to be sure. Nothing happened. I stepped out of the room, trying to wrap my head around what I'd seen. I walked around the living room for a bit, thinking maybe I imagined it. Eventually, I went back into my bedroom. I looked over at the corner. It was quiet. Nothing was out of place. The comforter looked the same as before, motionless. Still unsure of what to think, I left the room again. I walked over to the small bathroom near the entrance of the apartment. When I got in, I shut the door and splashed some water on my face. I figured maybe I just needed rest or was overthinking things. But while I was in there, I started hearing footsteps from the direction of my bedroom. Slow, steady steps coming closer. I quickly locked the bathroom door. The steps stopped right outside of it. Then, the doorknob started to turn. I stood there frozen, relieved I had locked it. A few seconds later, I heard the front door of my apartment open, and then close. Everything went completely quiet. After a few minutes, I opened the bathroom door and walked out. I locked the front door properly and then started checking the apartment. I looked through every corner, every closet. Nothing. No one was there. But when I stepped into my bedroom again, I noticed something had changed. The comforter that had been balled up in the corner earlier, it wasn't there anymore. It was now stretched out across the middle of the room. A couple of years ago, I was on a FaceTime call with my friend late at night. It was my best friend Chris, and during that time, we used to FaceTime pretty often. I was living alone in a small apartment then, and we'd been talking for a few hours, just chatting about random stuff. While we were still on the call, I got another FaceTime request from a number I didn't recognize. I mentioned it to Chris, and he told me I should just pick up and see who it was. I was curious too, so I ended the call with him and answered the new one. When the screen came on, there was a man I didn't recognize. His eyes were strangely wide open, like he was forcing them to stay open as much as possible, and he was holding his phone very close to his face. It made him look uncomfortable and strange. I asked who he was, and he responded by saying my name. That threw me off. I asked how he knew who I was, but instead of answering, he started saying weird stuff in this low, mumbly voice. He was muttering things like I should be careful and that he was going to find me. It didn't make much sense. Most of what he said was just scattered and strange. I kept asking him who he was, but he never gave me a clear answer. I had no idea how he even got my number or how he knew my name. Eventually, it just got too weird, so I ended the call. I immediately called Chris back and told him what had just happened. He thought it was hilarious and couldn't stop laughing. I was kind of laughing too, but honestly, it felt more disturbing than funny. It really seemed like the guy was trying to scare me or mess with me on purpose. About 5 minutes into talking to Chris again, that same number called back. I told him and picked up the call again. It was the same guy doing the same thing. He kept going with more of that strange talk, and I tried cutting him off to ask who he was and what he wanted. That time he just stopped talking and started staring into the camera. His eyes were still wide open and he didn't say a word. He kept doing that for a long while. I tried asking him more questions, but he stayed silent, just staring. I told him I was going to block him and ended the call. Then I blocked his number right after. I called Chris again, explained what happened, and we kept talking. The guy didn't try to contact me again that night, which I was relieved about. Still, I kept wondering if he might try calling again from another number, or even worse, show up at my place. But thankfully, that never happened. For the next couple of weeks, everything felt normal. I kind of forgot about the whole thing. Then 2 weeks later, I randomly got another FaceTime call. I didn't even think much. I just answered it. It was late, and I was at home again. Same guy, same strange look. As soon as I saw it was him, I hung up right away and blocked the new number. I honestly didn't know what to think at that point. Part of me figured he might keep finding new numbers to reach me, but after that, I never got another call. I still think about it sometimes. Who was that guy? How did he get my name and number? I've tried to figure it out, but I never found any answers. The whole thing still feels really off. I just hope I never hear from him again. This happened to me earlier this year. One evening, my partner and I were out on the porch around 9 p.m. We live deep in the countryside near a quiet highway that runs between two main exits. The stars were out, and it was peaceful with just the sound of crickets. We were sitting near the fire when I heard something and told my partner to be quiet so I could listen closely. It was a woman yelling. It didn't sound right. She was calling for help in a way that made it clear something was very wrong. It didn't sound like any usual yelling. I looked at my partner, and we both knew this wasn't just someone messing around. Her voice got louder, which meant she was getting closer to our house. After a bit, we saw someone running along the grassy area between the roads, heading toward the stretch of highway near our property. Our house sits a good bit back from the road down a long driveway, but it's still close enough that we could clearly see the highway. If we could see her, she could also probably see us, especially with our fire lit. The house across from us still had their holiday lights up, which made the road even easier to see. I dropped my cigarette in the fire and quickly went to the doorway to grab my phone and call 911. My partner ran inside past me to grab a jacket and shoes. I told him not to go out there, but he didn't listen and kept getting ready anyway. Just as he was getting dressed, a red car sped up the road and pulled over near the woman. She was still in the grassy median, so there was a ditch between her and the car. A man was driving, but I couldn't make out his face. I could hear him yelling, saying he was going to hurt her and calling her names I won't repeat. He seemed to be tossing things out of the car, maybe her clothes or trash. I couldn't really tell. As soon as she saw the car, she started running directly toward our yard. By then, I was already on the phone with emergency services, but since we're a good distance from town, I knew it would take a bit for them to arrive. My partner had finished putting on his shoes and jacket and ran out to meet her. He asked if she was all right. She said she had gotten a ride from that man, but partway through the drive he started acting strange. He wouldn't let her out of the car when she asked, and She said at one point she looked into the back seat and saw a roll of duct tape. That scared her, so when she had the chance, she jumped out of the car while it was still moving and just started running and yelling for help. My partner brought her inside, and we called the police again to share what we had just learned. They told us to stay on the line until someone arrived. Inside the house, under the lights, we saw that her face was in bad shape. She had some cuts and scrapes, probably from falling on the road, and she said the man had hit her before she got out. We locked the door and stayed close to the front window, waiting for help to get there, while my partner stayed on the phone giving updates. He told them the red car was still parked out on the highway, but the man wasn't in sight. I tried to stay calm and comfort the woman when we suddenly heard a loud noise at the door. The man was outside shouting, saying he saw her run into our house. He also said the people inside couldn't keep her safe. I yelled back through the door, telling him to leave our property and that the police were already on the way. What he said next was completely unexpected. He shouted back that the police wouldn't make it in time. Then he started hitting and kicking the door, clearly trying to force his way in. The woman got even more upset and kept asking us to help her. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a large knife just in case. Our front door is very solid and strong, but the windows could be broken if someone really tried. My partner went to the bedroom and came back with his gun. Right at that moment, a police car pulled up into the yard, and 2 more came right behind it. The man saw them and took off running into the woods. Some of the officers stayed with us and helped the woman while the others began searching for the man. They found him about 2 hours later. It was definitely one of the more stressful nights we've had, but I'm glad the officers arrived when they did. If he had broken through a window, it might have ended much worse. My partner could have been forced to defend us, and no one wants that situation unless there's no other choice.